are honored to be here today on March 8th, International Women's Day, and one day after the birth anniversary of Mr. Douglas Anderson, born 138 years ago. Those whose commitment to education continues to inspire us to this day, but more of that later.
Jane's memoir does focus on the development of Douglas Anderson and LaVilla Schools of the Arts, but it also serves as a snapshot of middle-class life in Jacksonville starting in the early 1940s. Tonight, we'll share with you our process of putting the book together, some details capturing life at that time, and the history of Douglas Anderson and LaVilla Schools of the Arts. First, I'd like to recognize some people. The person who got us started on this journey, she was going to be here with us tonight, but she couldn't, was Susan Brandenburg. Susan wrote an article on Jane for the San Marco Neighbor magazine, and she floated the idea. She said, "My gosh, Jane, you're so full of fun stories. You ought to write a book." We're going, "Oh, well, maybe." And she said, "Here's what we'll do." So she's written, over 50 books on people, so I thought she probably knows what she's doing. So we started in person before COVID, BC. That's the other BC. Okay. So we started in person, and Jane would just tell her these stories, and Susan types like lightning, so she would write up the stories. Then Susan would email me the stories in segments, and then I put them together and just fluffed it up a little bit and made the drama a little more dramatic and the humor a little funny-fied, And so I really wanted it to be like a novel. And I've been told that it does. So we put all that together, and then we handed off our final draft to our friend Emily Richardson, who's right there. Would you like to Emily then did the copy editing and made all kinds of really good suggestions. So she was a big help. Then we handed it to Sally Ball Sharp, who is a professional graphic artist and Jane's niece by marriage. She designed the cover and the layout of the book and scanned in thousands of photographs and documents in the process of doing that. Sally couldn't be with us tonight, but some of her family is here. Her husband, Michael, who is Jane's nephew, and his daughter, Tucker. So they are here tonight. So we self-published this through Ingram Spark because it's only regional, pretty much regional interest. So we decided, well, we might as well just self-publish it. Ingram Spark did a great job for us, made an ebook copy, set it up on Amazon and so on through Sally. Sally handled all that. So that was sort of our process, and if you have any questions about it, then you can contact Susan Brandenburg or us, and we can tell you what it was like. So now, I will turn it over to Jane to bring her stories alive for all of us.
My earliest memory is leaning far out over the front rail of our porch, impatiently watching for the carpool to nursery school. Mother said, "They're not late, Jane, I assure you. Just sit down here with me and be patient." I glanced back to see her sitting on the porch swing, calmly folding a dish towel on her lap. She had no idea idea how important this was, that I was nearly 4, that this was my first day of school. And at school, I was going to learn colors and play games and make friends. We are honored to be here today on, is that right? Okay.
Sorry for reading from a script, but at this stage, we're doing well to remember each
Remember our
other's
own
names.
names. It's true. As with most first memoirs, things may not have happened exactly the way it seemed, but to make sense, as my future unfolded, it was as I realized I was embarking that day on my life's work. Living in Indianapolis, my parents waited 10 years to have me, their first child, because no one knew when the Great Depression would end. They were among the lucky few to have both of them had jobs. My father, Robert Sharp, worked at City Ice and Fuel. And my mother was a buyer for a department store. She always wanted to talk me into becoming someone who bought clothes for a department store. I liked much better to buy them for me. So, I was born in Indianapolis on July 22nd, 1938, as the Depression seemed to be lifting. As Daddy rose in responsibility with City Ice and Fuel, he was made regional supervisor of the Southeast and was told that he could move anywhere he wanted to live in the territory. The story goes that when they drove across the Florida border into Jacksonville, he said, "This'll do." They bought a new brick house for $7,000 on Pershing Road in the new subdivision of Fairfax Manor, where we lived throughout my childhood. The Sharp family routines were typical of those times. I rode my bike to and from Fishware Elementary School, and Daddy came home for lunch and a nap every day. We attended Riverside Presbyterian Church, which became an important part of our social lives. The neighborhood kids, like most kids in that idyllic time, were free to hop on our bikes and go anywhere we wanted. We would ride down to play in Fishware Creek, or on Saturdays we could stay in the Fairfax movie theater all day long for 9 cents. We had to be home when the streetlights came on, but otherwise we were free to figure out how to entertain ourselves and solve our own problems. The summer after I graduated from the University of North Carolina, my father died. I needed to stay home with my mother and little brother Bobby and teach rather than pursue my career dream of becoming a stewardess. I was among the first faculty of the brand new Hyde Grove Elementary, where I taught 5th grade. The principal of Hyde Grove was Ms. Mabel Pitts from Shadydale, Georgia. At this point in history, intercom systems were quite a new thing, and Miss Pitts had a hard time getting used to it. On a typical morning with the children quietly doing art projects or reading aloud in small groups, we would hear a loud click and then crayons, pencils, and paintbrushes flew into the air, and teachers in every room clutched don't have to blow in it. It's on now, and you have to talk into the microphone. Once she yelled, Teachers, will you tell your children to stop putting apple cores down the commodes? I stifled a woof and laughter, and several kids at each other were saying, "What's a commode?" The book is full of this kind of hilarious and touching events that can only happen in schools. I just fell in love with my students and my new career. I taught 4 years in Duval County and then was selected for the Department of Defense overseas schools, where I taught for 2 years in Germany and 1 year in Japan. That experience gave me a passion for travel, and for travel that has stayed with me my whole life. When I came back from being overseas, I worked 2 years in Montgomery County, Maryland. Now I want you to know that that particular county was selected as the best county in the entire United States. If that was the best, I sure have seen the worst. But in Maryland is where I met my first husband, Bill Condon, and finally returned home to build a career as a teacher and then principal of several elementary schools in Duval County. I learned early in my career that the most important aspect of being a principal is to hire competent and dedicated staff and teachers, and then support them and let them work their magic. And then came the call. In the early 80s, the Chamber of Commerce took some civic leaders to Baltimore to get ideas about how to improve life in Jacksonville. Inspired by what they saw, they made plans for the Jacksonville Landing and a high school for the visual and performing arts here in Jacksonville. The Douglas Anderson Building, chosen as the site of the art school, was originally built in 1922 for black students during the era of segregation, and afterwards served as a 6th grade center and even as a storage unit for the school system. It would take a lot of work to make it into a functioning art school. There were also some administrative problems that first year. So Superintendent Herb Sang decided to change the leadership. I was then principal of Timaquan Elementary, but I did have a bachelor's in secondary education and an EDS in educational leadership. I wasn't an expert in fine arts, but I knew the importance for individuals and communities. I knew how to hire expert teachers and how to support them to make the magic happen for their students. I began to form a mental vision of what an excellent art school could be. I was thrilled to be chosen as the new principal of Douglas Anderson School of the Arts in 1986. The campus, I'm sorry, folks. The campus of the original Douglas Anderson High School had no theater, no dance studio, no art studios or galleries, no instrumental music telling the volunteers what they needed, and the volunteers finding a way to get it done. No theater, we converted the automotive shop. No art galleries, we created displays in halls throughout the building and transformed classrooms into show galleries. Then we took half of the gymnasium and marked it off with ropes to designate dance studios. Of course, all of this riled up the bureaucracy because we had to do things that had never been done in the Duval County schools before. We were creating something new, so I had to figure out a way to bring the bureaucracy along with us. For example, we were lucky enough to have ballet superstar Edward Villella offer to hold a master class for our students. To get money to pay him, I had to call city purchasing. The agent said, "Now let me get this straight. You're going to pay $1,000 to this guy to come and dance with your kids?" I said yes, and believe me, it's a bargain. He paused and then said, "Well, to each his own." We had to buy tutus, toe shoes, leotards, microphones, and Yamaha pianos. I had to hire professional artists who had no teaching certificates. We had to sell tickets to performances during the day, school hours, which was strictly against the rules for some reason that actually escapes me even to this day. I sometimes said, "Look, you're going to write me up for something, so just do it for that." So I finally started asking, help me figure out how we can do what we need to do, rather than all the reasons why we can't. Help me find a way. Help me build this building, this school, into what it can be, instead of always telling me what it can't. That approach began to get the system on my side, and our school began to flourish. Then the faculty came up with the idea that we eventually called Showtime, which turned out to be one of our best traditions. We held the show during school hours in the gym every 6 weeks, incorporating every arts area that had a project to share. The kids loved it, and I could see it bonding the students to each other as they shared their talents. We had no idea what would happen the first time we put it together. At the first show, the audience, composed of the entire school, watched quietly as a tall African-American boy in tights walked onto the stage alone and struck a ballet pose. This was back in the 80s, and I waited breathlessly, not knowing how hundreds of other teen boys were going to react. As the music began and the dancers moved, the audience became totally, eerily still. This boy danced like a dream. At the end, the spectators still sat silent, stunned, and then jumped to their feet with thunderous applause, hooting and yelling bravo. I knew then that this inspiration of a group of community leaders to build a world-class school of the arts was going to happen. Douglas Anderson was going to thrive. Another great tradition at Douglas Anderson was proposed the first year of my tenure. Ace Martin, our band director, stood up in a faculty meeting and said, "Why don't we have a big show to share with the city how talented our students are? We could call it a holiday gift to Jacksonville." Now, I had no idea how we could put something like that together. But wanting to support this great team of teachers, I said, "Sure, let's find a way to do it." And we started making plans. On December 18th, 1986, the curtain went up at the Civic Auditorium, and student Grady Robinson, singing "One Voice," rose from stage under the proscenium, and the audience sprang to their feet with thunderous applause. This is how we came up with what is now known as extravaganza. For every year since then, hundreds of people have packed the Times Union Center to watch performances by students at Douglas Anderson School of the Arts. The mayor, many city council members, and other politicians, and civics leaders from every sector came to celebrate the achievements of these talented students, and the tradition continues to this day. We also wanted to incorporate the history of this school and the courage of its founder, Mr. Douglas Anderson, into its new identity as a school of the arts. We brought in alumni from the original school to share with our students their experiences at the school and of living through the eras of Jim Crow and segregation. Arts director Jackie Cornelius and I were able to get grants to provide transportation and tickets for these original alumni to attend every performance at the school and every extravaganza. In the fall of 1990, we hired beloved local architect Robert Brower to finally design the facility that a school like Douglas Anderson deserves. Brower built all of the arts areas and a 700-seat theater with 3-story flies. Next to the main theater is a scene shop with all of the equipment necessary to build a set on site and roll it straight into the backstage area to hoist up into the flies. A black box theater with flexible seating capable of theater in the round. 4 dance studios with mirrored walls and floating wood flooring. A costume shop and band and orchestra rooms with professional-grade recording studios. We also added every advanced course necessary to prepare students academically for top colleges. With this state-of-the-art facility and curriculum, I knew that we would be able to finally live up to our mission statement, where arts and academics meet in excellence. I have stayed in touch with many of the students from those first years. Reese Dickerson, who has a thriving music career here in Jacksonville, shared his memory with us. He wrote, "Take a young black kid from the north side of town who spent all of his formative years in the Pentecostal church. Put him in with white kids who skated and listened to heavy metal, and goth kids, Asian kids, and Hispanic kids, and Native Americans, and rednecks and nerds. What an exciting time. It both scared me and stirred up so much curiosity. I lost who I thought I was and found myself, my artistic voice. I met strangers who are still my closest friends 32 years later. I learned how to express sentiment that were as foreign to me as a language I'd never heard. So I say thanks. I love what you taught me. I loved all the scary auditions. Thank you, Douglas Anderson School of the Arts. Nobody was happier with the new School of the Arts than my husband, Bill Condon. Bill was the most knowledgeable person I have ever known, and he was at my side every turn. And he loved and admired the expert faculty at Douglas Anderson. He attended nearly every performance at the school during my 10 years there. Unfortunately, Bill's health declined sharply in 1995. I had hired as arts director Jackie Cornelius, who I knew had the ability and experience at this point to take over Douglas Anderson as principal and keep it on the right path. In the fall of 1996, I retired to be at Bill's side as he faced the last few years of his life. To my shock, Bill died within just a few months, and I realized I had lost the two things most loved in my life: an amazing husband and a fabulous career. But life goes on. In 1997, I got a call. How would you like to build a middle school of the arts? I would be taking over Landon Middle School and building an arts program and designing a facility to accommodate a new state-of-the-art school in the historical LaVilla section of downtown. I was principal of Landon while we waited for the new school to be approved. But then the challenges arose. In late 1998, just before construction was to begin, a developer offered to buy the piece of land already purchased by the school. I held tight. The rich history of LaVilla as a center of African American art and culture was warranted. Having an arts institution there, a successful art school, would honor that history and become a point of pride for the community that was lost through an urban renewal project in the 1960s. LaVilla School of the Arts would also be a companion piece to the recently renewed Ritz Theater complex, headed by my friend Carol Alexander. This time, I had defenders all over the community. Ron Littlepage of the Florida Times Union and Dr. James Crooks of UNF, among others, supported the plan of keeping LaVilla School in the LaVilla section where it belonged. The battle over, we proceeded to the groundbreaking ceremony, which was a wonderful beginning. The Haskell Corporation furnished barbecue. Civic leaders came out to watch our kids perform. A ballet choreographed with a huge caterpillar crane. Months later, the hard hat party, where students performed for dignitaries in roofless rooms, and newspapers and magazines published glowing reviews. I assembled an excellent team of support staff and teachers who were experts in their fields, and also devoted to teaching middle school children. Not an easy find, but they were there. These teachers formed a faculty that would give our students a solid education and and enriching art experience at this brand new school. I would like to particularly recognize Frances Smith, my secretary, whom I brought with me from Douglas Anderson to Landon and then to LaVilla. She's with us tonight, and she can just raise her hand so you know where she is. You don't do any of the things I did without Frances. I'm serious. The first faculty group shared a special bond and devotion to the school. The original faculty members still wear a button that says, "Chosen by Jane," which inspired the title of this book. Of course, nothing goes without a few hitches. The music faculty told me the band room ceiling was too low. I knew they were right from my experience building facilities at Douglas Anderson. I called the construction manager. He told me, "We can't make any changes at this point without delaying the whole project." This felt familiar. Another form of bureaucracy that can't be done. I decided we had to find a way. Anyway, at home that evening, I kept turning over in my mind the problem of the shallow band room and the nightmare of acoustics it could cause. Then I woke up in the middle of the night and said, "The floor! We can kind of dig out the floor to add 5 feet to the height of the room." It worked. A crew of men came in and dug out the floor 5 feet deeper. To this day, at the entrance to the band room, stairs lead 5 feet down to the floor. Apparently the dimensions work just fine because LaVilla's various band has won many awards and national around the nation. The rest of the facilities worked beautifully. The theater is designed with maximum flexibility and capacity. It can seat 1,000 people, but offers smaller spaces as needed. There's a black box theater and collapsible bleachers to create theater in the round, as well as any other configuration. Marley flooring accommodates dance performances and large master classes. 2003 was the year I would see the original 6th graders graduate from LaVilla as 8th graders, ready to audition for Douglas Anderson or to go to Stanton or another high school. My baby could walk, and I was happy with everything about it. I also had met and married a handsome, wonderful man, Dan Selhorst. We were in our mid-60s, and I wasn't sure how much time we had left to do all the things we wanted to do. I had worked 7 years past my first retirement from DA. Now, with the promise of a happy new life with my husband, I wanted to start living for me. So, in 2003, I turned in the paperwork and announced my retirement. The response from my faculty and staff was uplifting and heartwarming. Dan and I traveled the world and enjoyed life together until he died in 2011. The personal part of the book goes into some funny and touching details about the 2 very different men I was married to, and how they enriched my life and supported my demanding career. I feel lucky to have enjoyed a life full of challenges and achievements, and to still be in touch with students and faculty around the world. I feel especially honored to know many of our students who have gone on to create their dream careers. Here are just a few examples. Alfonso Horn is a Grammy-winning trumpeter who performs with Wynton Marsalis, Rihanna, and Audra McDonald, among others. Gary Weber is pastor at Aspire Church in San Marco and has played starring roles in community theater and the Alhambra. He and his wife Sherry, both DA alums, sent their 4 children through LaVilla and Douglas Anderson. Felicia Norman worked with Warner Brothers for 10 years and is now a playwright with her own production company in LA. Ulysses Owens is a 5-time Grammy winner, drummer who performs with his own jazz groups all over the world. His Jacksonville nonprofit, Don't Miss a Beat, offers hundreds of underserved. And I think Ulysses is here. Is he?
He has not come in.
Okay.
His mother was here.
His mother was here earlier and said he's coming. Okay. All right. I did that one. Oh.
Finish.
Okay. Don't Miss a Beat offers hundreds of underserved children opportunities in the arts. Jameson Platt is principal cellist in the Glen Falls Symphony and teaches at New England Music Camp. He has performed with the Jacksonville Symphony in Lincoln Center and at Carnegie Hall, among many other venues. Daniel Breaker has acted in numerous Broadway shows and now stars as Aaron Burr in Hamilton on Broadway. Also, testimonies of students like Reese Dickerson's and Eric Kegler's express the vision of school come to life. The experience of students who are artists in their souls, who just need a chance to become who they are meant to be. Eric Kegler, retired professional ballet dancer, who now owns X Interiors in Jackson, Mississippi, says, "It was at DA that I found my first tribe of people. They accepted me before I even understood how to accept myself. I mean, you tried being a boy ballet dancer with a love of interior design in the 80s. It was rough. I owe that school and those people a million thanks for being my family. And 30 years later, you still are. You're that same group that makes my soul sing and taught me that we are never really broken or different. We just need the right tribe to bring us in from the rain." So many wonderful and talented kids, Douglas Anderson and LaVilla of the Arts, provided that tribe.